Photoshop now has a new select and mask feature. Now this feature is a little bit different because it does replace the refine edge and the refine mask feature that you may have been used to. To activate this is actually rather quite simple. We'll go into any of our selection tool options. I'm going to select a rectangular marquee, and you'll notice the select and mask button is now active. So I'll go and click on that. Once I do, now by default it shows you a onion skin mode. Now this onion skin mode is basically like a transparency. And that's why they call it onion skin, I assume, because onion skin has transparent layers a little bit. I think, at least that's why I assume they called it that. But anyways, let's just go with it. So first and foremost, you notice that under transparency, it shows you the transparent opacity of the layer itself. The first thing that we need to do is, let's say that we're going to extract him from the background. We are first and foremost going to select our first tool here, which allows us to select the option, and it's the quick selection tool. Now we can change our brush size over here, and then we will simply go ahead and begin doing a general selection. If you want to make your brush size smaller and the hardness, you can change that as well. But by default, I think it does a pretty good job no matter what brush size you pick, as long as it's within the confines of the selection. Now that we've done our selection, you notice that it has done a pretty good job overall. There are some areas that we need to fine tune, and we're going to get into that step next. So if I change my transparency, you'll notice that, oh, you know what? It did a good job except for these little strands of hairs that are going to the background. We're going to bring back. Maybe we can do that. It also gives us a few different views. So if we click on overlay, we see that we can change the color of it. We can select a black, red, whatever we want. So let's select blue for now, because I think blue is a very pleasing color visually to look at when we're looking at our mistakes. Okay, so the first thing to note is my workflow is usually selecting a general area like we've done, coming over and clicking on overlay, and then now we'll go ahead and go to our next tool, which is the refine area. So I can click on that, and I can brush over the other parts that I want included. And you notice that the color of that hair comes back. And click on the rest of it, and that background begins to go away. I think they've improved this section quite a bit from the previous version, which is great. And then we'll go across the hair. And you can see that I'm not really being really careful either. I'm doing a pretty lenient job with exactly how much I'm selecting and how much I'm applying the brush to. So it does hold accountable quite a bit with the engine itself, without you leaving the user to figure out exactly how much to do, which I like, because I want to do as less as possible with the max amount of results. Another view that is really cool to use is the ability to change different functions. So I can go on black, and if the refined edge feature doesn't work very well, I can go back to my selection process. I can say minus, which takes away from the selection. I can change my brush size, and then quickly just go in and, so let's see if that works. Voila! So it takes away that little area as well. And so it gives Photoshop a better means of adding or removing selections. I'll remove some of that too. Let's see if it works. Not so much. Let's see if I can refine it again and get it really good. And that's better. Now I'll go up. I'll do the same thing maybe here. Let's see if that works. This is definitely hit or miss. Now let's say that you want to be really precise, right? Let's say that maybe it's not good enough. Well, you can override it with a manual brush. This third brush here is the actual brush that allows you to add or take away from selections. So if I feel like it's not perfect, I can go in there and change the actual area that I want. So I'm painting white or black, just like I would do with the mask. I could obviously leave that once I export this and bring it to Photoshop, but it's good to know that this option exists. So let's say that's good enough for now, and then I can go further. I can also change my transparency on white, which I think would be good, because if I'm going to change this to another background, it's going to be a bright background, so I don't have to worry too much about every single little pixel. So here we go. You can see a before and after of the hair. Obviously, there are some areas that are still a little bit opaque, which is kind of good, because if you have backlight, you kind of want some transparency to be in the hair. And the refine filter, the refine edge brush, or the refine brush itself did a great job of actually making some of those selections for me. Another option that we have here, let me put on black really quick, is this smooth. So what that does is kind of blurs the mask itself, which I personally don't think is a good idea, because when you see the progress as it loads, it just makes a mess of the mask. The feather does kind of the same thing. It kind of feathers the mask outwards globally. Contrast, in case it's too soft of the selection, you can increase the contrast, and that's going to amplify the contrast of the selection, so let's not do that. This shift edge is really useful sometimes. It's going to bring the mask outward or inward without adjusting the contrast level of the selection. So you can see it completely brings it in if I go into the minus. And if I quickly just double click, it goes back to 0%. Maybe I can add a little bit, maybe minus like 7, and it brings it in just a touch. So let's go back to on white, and I think that looks pretty good. It made a selection, it did a good job. Edge detection, automatically I would leave as is unless there's a reason to change this. But what edge detection is the selection that it makes with this brush itself. It has a default setting. If I change that, it's going to soften the selection of the edges, which I don't really want to do by default. So my advice to you is do that and then make your selection. I can say remember settings in case this is something that I want to do again and again. I also have this selection here. So if I go back and go to let's go on black. If I do a selection like this, you see it just adds a part of a selection to the image that I don't want. So I'll do Command Z and undo. Then the output settings is really important because I can hit decontaminate colors. So in case there's any different colors coming in on the mask itself, it'll fix that for me. So the edges of the mask take away some of that blue color that was there. If I uncheck that, it brings it back. So I'm going to keep that off. I'm going to say either a new layer with mask or a layer mask. So I'll say new layer, I'll say layer mask. Hit OK. And as you see, it is the same layer with the mask option. Clicking on the mask itself shows you that really incredible selection that we did. And then from here, you can brush it up if you want to with the standard tools. I can go back to my brush tool, and if I so wanted, I can come in with a white brush and just quickly clean it up even further. And that is my preference, is doing it once the mask is already done and just doing a quick little cleanup. Or I can click on the dodge tool here, ensuring the highlights are selected. I'll change my brush size down like this, and I'll just quickly dodge that area. And what that does is only going to affect the highlights, so the edges stay intact. So I don't have to really know how to do anything there, which is great. And then I'm back here again. If I want to tweak that, let's go to select and mask. And there you go. My mask is back, and I can adjust the mask as needed. So that is an overview of our amazing new feature we have with the Select and Mask tool in Photoshop CC 2015.5.